Welcome to Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio coverage of Fundraising Day 2014. We're at the Marriott Marquis Hotel in Times Square, New York City. We're beginning the day with Angel Aloma. Angel, his seminar topic is Shift. Shift happens. How to ensure upgrading your donors is a smooth move. Angel Aloma is Executive Director of Food for the Poor. Angel Aloma, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
It's my pleasure. I'm glad you're with me on a very busy day. Thank you for taking time in the beginning. We're talking about the shift, the upgrade from, I guess, modest donor to major donor?
Right. Basically, we should be working all the time getting our middle donors to become upper middle and then afterwards major donors. Some will not, but a lot of them will if they're treated properly.
Okay, and what is it that you see nonprofits sometimes doing wrong, I guess, not treating properly, I guess, generally?
Well, one of the major things is not being truly donor-centric. I think at all nonprofits, whenever we have a meeting, we say donor is king, donor is king. But it takes, something really quite traumatic to make you internalize that issue. I went all the way to Holland to be inspired by an American 4 years ago, Tom Ahern. And he had pieces from all different charities, and he was reading them. And he said, look at this, everything is about the charity. And they had done studies where 80% of donors who had left the charities had claimed to be distanced by the charity. And so when I went back home, I thought to myself very smugly, we don't do that. And then I started going over our pieces, and I realized that everything was about food for the poor. Food for the poor builds houses. Food for the poor gives food. Food for the poor digs wells. So I went on a rampage for 3 years with our writers, and food for the poor had to become absent. It had to be the donor. And the word help had to be eliminated. Not thank you for helping us build homes, is thank you for building homes. Thank you for feeding starving children. Thank you for giving clean water to children at risk of death.
Not thank you for helping us to do all those things.
Exactly.
And supporting us in doing all those things.
Right.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. So it starts, now you felt you had to go to Holland to see Tom Ahern. No one in the U.S. is doing this well?
I'm sure Tom Ahern did at some point, but
is he the only one in the world?
The
No, it can't
IFC
be.
conference in Holland is a beautiful conference. 963 people were there, 63 different countries represented, and
IFC
you're sequestered.
is International Fundraising
Congress. Yes.
Okay, Congress. Oh, it's a Congress, not a conference. It's a Congress. And what year was this that you went?
I have been every year for the last 7 years, but this is 4 years ago that I went in October. It's every October in Holland.
Okay, so you came back, and you started with your marketing communications.
We have our own creative in-house, so I went to the creative director. I said, this is what we have to do, and I edit everything. I am sort of the final editor before things leave the organization. So whenever I saw anything that was organization-centric, I took it out, sent it back, and it took actually 3 years to get the writers to go from organizational-centered to donor-centered.
But you're the executive director. Why did it take 3 years?
Because they were accustomed for 29 years before that doing this.
Okay.
We're a 32-year-old organization.
Okay. All right. You've accounted for all the years. There you go.
And you know what they say? Okay. Culture eats innovation for lunch.
Oh, that's very good. I never heard that. But culture eats innovation for lunch. Yeah, that's okay. It's very hard to change. What else do we need to be thinking about? Well, anything else? Let's say within our marketing, our messages.
To be truly donor-centric, you also have to break down the silos. And frankly, when I went to Food for the Poor 14 years ago, everybody had given up on it. It was such a tough fight. And then I was sitting at a conference here in New York, actually, and I heard a speaker say something that if you don't dream really big, you will never achieve the impossible. And I stopped listening to him at that point, and I wrote 8 pages of a new fundraising vision. And I went back and I said, you know what? This is not happening by itself. So I became somewhat of a benign dictator. And I said, this is my vision for this. We're going to stop having the silos. I know it'll take some time. I want you to buy in. I want your feedback. But in the final analysis, this will happen. I said, if you're not on my bus, you have to get off the bus, but I'm not going to have any energy vampires started going around saying, oh no, this is too hard. Oh no, we can't do this. And it's amazing. We have beautiful people who are fundraisers, and they're so nice and so personable, but you take $15 of their credit and they go totally nuts. So
why don't we let's acquaint listeners with what Food for the Poor does.
Well, our name has become a misnomer. We're a 32-year-old charity. We work in our backyard. We're in Florida, and we help 17 countries in the Caribbean and Latin America. And we started out giving food to missionaries in Jamaica, and then we went to Haiti, and then now we're in 17 countries. And we do not only food, we do housing, we do water wells, we do medical, we do education and self-sustainable projects.
Now, subsumed in the story you just told is this kind of change has to come from leadership.
Absolutely. It has to come from the top down, because people, fundraisers sort of by nature have that sales mentality that it's mine, the donor is mine, the sale is mine.
Yeah.
And so you have to get rid of that. And actually I have to say that for the last year and a half that I started this, it has been working really beautifully. Because if you're going to be donor-centric, then the donor has to choose what he wants to give to and by what channel he'll give it. And if we restrict him from that, then we're not being donor-centric.
Let's help the leadership that's listening. It was a 3-year process.
It was.
Give us some details about what you had to do to create the culture, the culture change.
Well, as I said, it has to be somewhat of a benign dictatorship.
Okay, I bet you seem more like a benevolent dictator.
A benevolent
you're probably
dictator,
benevolent.
that's fine.
I bet you're benevolent, not just benign. Okay.
You're right. I believe in servant leadership, but at the same time, you have to set the pace. And so I had a lot of fundraising meetings. I am in charge of the fundraising at Food for the Poor. So I had meeting with the directors. The creative director also answers to me, so I was able to influence that also.
Okay.
And the fact that I sent it back if they didn't do it right, and had to redo it, eventually it started diminishing and diminishing until now. And it's funny because at that time we used to send 23 pieces of mail a year, that most people gasp when they hear that. And we used to get a lot of complaints about too much mail, too much mail. Then we are now sending 28, and we get 70% less complaints because now the donor is feeling good about himself when he reads it.
Outstanding. Slightly more communications a year, and 70% fewer complaints.
Right.
Outstanding. All right. Well, we need to dive in deeper. What do we do with the, if we have, maybe you didn't at Food for the Poor, but the recalcitrant employee, whether fundraiser or editor, they're just not, or even board member, they're just not coming along to true donor centrism.
Our board is looking at the larger picture, and they get all the financial stuff, they get all the audited financial statements. We have an internal auditor that answers to them, but they really don't interfere in the daily running of the organization. Okay. And as long as we're doing well, they're happy and they're looking over, but they're looking mostly at financials. And
so they're respecting that it's your
absolutely
it's your responsibility to change the culture.
They're not fundraising experts.
Oh, okay, so board was not an
issue.
Okay.
It was mostly in the lower level of fundraising that we had the issue, because we had to also change our way of judging the fundraisers. Because whereas before they were judged totally by bottom line, we had to find new ways, like by the number of donors that they passed on to a higher level, rather than by how much they actually collected themselves.
Excellent. Let's talk more about some of these quantitative measures that you use. So that's one measure, is how many donors did you pass on?
Right.
Which is antithetical to the culture that it had been, and which is very common in fundraising. To hold on to them. So excellent. What other measures did you use?
Well, we started for our phone center, for example. We have an internal phone center with 61 people in it. And we started incentivizing by the number of completed calls rather than by how much money they made, because there is a very definite connection between number of calls and income. So we stopped looking at income and incentivized them for the number of calls.
Completed calls.
Completed calls, exactly.
Meaning they
spoke
had
to
a conversation
the donor and so forth, because then the phone center, instead of a fundraising department, they have 3 campaigns a year, but they're also a service department. So basically, now what they do is, I ask every director who is a fundraiser and their monthly reports to have a line for how much their department raised, but also to have a second line showing the donors that they have in their department, how much money they have raised for the organization altogether. And it's amazing, because those same donors gave to 3 or 4 other channels now that they're no longer restricted by the fundraiser.
Yes, so they've broadened their experience with Food for the Poor.
Absolutely, and we're doing better than the year before. We are actually above budget this year. And they haven't been the best, conditions country-wise, economy-wise, but we still have done better every year.
Let's talk about more quantitative measures and analytics for evaluating the employee performance in creating the culture change? What else?
Right.
What else is there?
Well, we have a whole line of setup for direct mail in the phone center, where we what we're looking for is to move them up, and we have to treat all donors differently. Also, our radio donors that we acquire from radio are different. So we have started looking also at how best to treat them according how they want to be treated, to have more surveys, to have more of, like in our newsletters, we have, if you don't like the way, well, the language is not nice on what I'm saying now, but if you don't like the way you're being treated right now, communications-wise, please call this number, please let us know, please send an email to this, so they can know that they're in charge, that they're in control.
And when they give you feedback like that, you know that they love you.
Absolutely.
Because if they didn't love you, they would just say, forget it. I'm just going to write them up.
Absolutely. No,
so that's incredibly valuable.
We always flag people who complain because they're good enough to call us and let us know.
Right.
And
they care.
For our major donors, we have, for example, a whole different line of approach. Once they have reached that level, they have access to me. They all can get in touch with me. They have access to special events. They belong to a special club, to a special, they get a statue of Christ the beggar. We're a Christian organization, so we can do this, of Jesus the beggar. And, I have every month, I have 2 coffee breaks with the executive director, where each major donor person invites maybe 15 to 20 of their people to come on a conference call, and I thank them in a very special manner. I give them the updates of how the organization is doing to that point, which most other donors will get once a year. They get the annual report. These people are being told all the time, this is what your donations are doing this right now. And it's amazing when they start speaking in those calls, how they affect the other donors on that call. I mean, we end up in tears sometimes.
Yeah.
It's an amazing thing.
It sounds like it could be very moving.
It is.
Those calls are very moving.
It is, because I tell them stories of when I travel. Just 2 weeks ago, I was in Guyana. This Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I was in Haiti. Here, and I'm in New York now, totally the opposite situation. But, they love hearing things that they don't get in their normal appeals and their normal things. I write letters to anyone who gives a gift of $5,000 and up, and my letters are very donor-centric. I mean, there's one letter that just goes on that they're superheroes, and I always start with a statement that kind of makes them feel special, like, you are superheroes, and then I talk about how, like, Mighty Mouse, he used to come and save the day, and, then I give them a story of a starving...
Here I am to save the day.
Precisely.
I remember that. Yeah. I apologize for the people who have an ear that recognizes true music. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's not considered a classic anyway.
No, I still ruined it.
But it's amazing that they hear stuff like this and hear stories from the field that I just experienced. So I become somewhat emotional with them, and then they get that, and they really feel very special that they're being called to this small gathering, and they feel they're part of the inner circle, and they are, because I listen to what they say. I mean, we went through what we call an emotional inquiry study, a very expensive issue, but we are a very large charity.
Okay, an emotional inquiry study.
Yes. Where they interviewed in depth for hours 60 of our best donors in the organization to let us know really what is the truth. And when we ask our donors in a superficial conversation, why are you giving money to Food for the Poor? Because I want to help the poor. Well, in those studies, they found out that the number one reason is because donors want to feel like decent human beings in a world so full of negativity and evil. So then we know how to communicate, because that also, although we started doing the donor-centric before that, it kind of like confirms that, yes, this is the way. They want to feel good about themselves, and if you don't do that, they're not going to give.
And you ended up calling them superheroes.
Absolutely. I told them how they put on their cape of compassion and, their sword of generosity and, all this stuff. I built this whole story. And then what happens is that we get a second large gift shortly after they get my letter. And that's gratitude, thank you. The thank you thing, that's another huge thing where fundraising is concerned and moving donors up. We get more than 5% of our total income, cash income for the year from thank you letters. We never mention and ask in the thank you letter, but we send an envelope and we send a reply piece. Now, we were doing so well with thank yous that we decided, how about adding in, remember I told you we used to send 23 and now we're sending 28?
28, right.
We added 3 thank yous, not for a gift, just simply thanking the donors with a reply piece and an envelope. And guess what? The one in January, which is a tough month for us after the donors are exhausted from giving in fall, we made over $1 million net. Because again, the cost of a thank you is next to nothing. It's a piece of paper and an envelope, and you put in the reply piece and the envelope inside. That's we were thanking them for all their giving over the fall, over the year. But a very genuine, very heartfelt thank you. And man, they really responded to that in January when they would have been exhausted, as I said.
And that was not a thank you for a specific gift.
It was not at all.
For everything you had
so
done.
We do 3 of those a year in the points where we find it the hardest to send an appeal. Like in the summer, people are also not as ready to give. They're off on vacation and so forth. And again, last summer we did one and very successful
now,
again.
You're sending those just to recent donors?
No.
Lapsed donors also?
Not to lapsed, no. People who have given in the last 12 months.
Okay. So from when you're sending the mailing, 12 months previous.
But we're working on one now for people saying, we want to thank you for your generosity for so many years, and but we haven't heard from you recently, but we still are so appreciative because you helped us build at a crucial time. We're working on one like that too for the more recently lapsed.
Recent lapsed. Okay. Gosh, all right. We have a lot more time together, so we can spend more time on some detail. This became a part of the employee assessment, sort of their annual review.
Yeah, exactly.
How did you donor centrism? What do we call it?
It's basically, are you willing to to sacrifice your own personal beliefs for the good of the organization, for the good of the of the poor that we're helping? And it's part. Our evaluations they have a part that are very specific, but then you are able also to write whatever you like, and that's the part where I usually commend the ones who have, and I try to be gentle but firm with the ones that we don't, because what happens is basically when an employee refuses to get on the bus. And I read a book about the energy bus and energy vampires, and they become energy vampires. As a servant leader, I really tried to water, to fertilize, to give them every opportunity, to give them training so they can see the way that we want to head. But if all of that doesn't work, then you're actually doing them a favor by having them go to a place where they can be happy.
Yeah. I guess it's sort of a friction that you had to overcome.
There was a fair amount of resistance, particularly because there were some fundraising departments that were a mixture of fundraising and service, like the web, for example, where they do service for other departments, but they also do fundraising. And then we used to, for example, have 2 landing pages for every appeal, because the web oftentimes did an appeal based on a direct mail appeal. Mm-hmm. But 1 landing page for the URL went to direct mail, but the landing page for the general web went to web. And I said, no, this is sort of direct mail appeal, when most of us who are computer savvy, we don't go to the URL, we just put food for the poor and look for what we want, you know? Yeah. So, and that was, a big part of income. I said, you will be recognized for that. Don't worry, you're not going to be judged if it drops. And guess what? Web did better last year, and so did direct mail. So really what it does is it really makes the donor feel better, and when that happens, they give more.
I'm really interested in the overcoming these objections. Let's get a sense of how many.
It's still a process.
It still is 3 years
donors,
in.
The copywriters are all great now, but the issue of whose credit and so forth, it's we still, up to yesterday we had a directors meeting, and the issue came up. Like, we have an Angels of the Poor program, which is a monthly giving program, but the web has a separate giving program because their average monthly gift is $41.80, whereas the monthly gift for the Angels of the Poor program is $21. Yeah. So the director who runs the Angels of the Poor says, but hey, I want to get the web to push more of the Angels of the Poor, and we have to say, look, what is good for the poor, 41.80 or 21? If the web is doing better, if they're doing, then leave them with it. It's okay. If you lose a little branding for this.
How many people are in the direct fundraiser? How many direct fundraisers do you have?
We have a little over 300 employees at our building in Coconut Creek. We have 85 priests and pastors who go to churches every weekend to raise money for the poor, on behalf of the poor, on behalf of Food for the Poor. And so basically, I would say that of the 300 at work, about 200 are involved, maybe more than 200 are involved in fundraising.
Okay. And you said you're in charge of fundraising.
Of all the directors who fundraise, yeah.
Yes.
We have 13 fundraising departments, and all the directors answer to me.
Okay.
So there's the projects department, the creative department, the PR department. I'm also the spokesperson for the organization.
What other strategies? I mean, we still have some time left together. What other strategies haven't we talked about for creating this culture shift?
Well, I think you always, when you have an organization that is asking people for something, you always have to give back something. In our case, it's prayer. And we spend a lot of money on this. For example, with our own staff, we pay for half an hour at the beginning of each day, and the staff can choose either to start work at that point or to go to our prayer room for half an hour. Of course, it will be different for every organization. A non-religious and non-Christian organization, this would not work. But for us, our donors are inclined to really like this. With every appeal we send, with every with every appeal and with every newsletter, they have a chance to write a prayer request. Now, most people might think, okay, we throw those in the garbage or we put them in a big basket and pray over them. We actually call every donor that we have a phone number for and pray with them on the phone. Then we pray for them in the prayer room. So they really feel great about it. You should see some of our testimonial letters. You know, I was about to commit suicide and the person called me and I prayed with them.
Oh my goodness.
We have an iPhone app because we don't want to be left behind. We have an iPhone app. You press it for prayer, for Food for the Poor, and within 5 minutes, a live person calls to pray with you. So every organization has to think, what am I giving our donors over and above the great feeling? Because it does. It changes the hearts of the people who give to you. I mean, I feel we have 3 missions: our poor, our staff, and our donors, because we have changed so many lives to act with generosity. I mean, when people become generous, they're happier people. I mean, we have businessmen tell us, now I go to work knowing what is it I'm working for, you know? So we have that situation, you know, but you have to give them something besides that good feeling. You know, we know the brain produces all sort of chemicals when they give, but we have to give them something else over and above. So every organization should think, what is it that we are giving our donors that's making their lives better? In our case, it's prayer. In an environmental, you know, who knows, photographs of things that they have finished, you know, whatever, a calendar, you know, but we have to give back something. And I'm not talking about, you know, premiums, you know.
Yeah, you don't have to spend a lot of money.
I'm not talking about, you know, no, it's not.
It has to be thoughtful.
It could be a thank you call for the entire staff. Like, for example, I know that that Operation Smile does that once or twice a year. Their entire staff, the place shuts down for the day, and their entire staff calls donors. So we are actually considering doing that in writing, to have handwritten notes. We have 5 million donors on our file, 800,000 of which are active, so we can't do it for all donors, but taking the top level of our file and having all our staff. Can you imagine how great it would be for someone to open a letter and have it from the person who cleans the cafeteria? You know, say,
Here's
I am
how,
writing
yeah,
you.
I'm a huge advocate of the handwritten note because they're so infrequent, and especially for older donors,
Right.
They grew up with that,
Right.
and it's now so uncommon. I mean, they're lucky to get an email or a text. But the handwritten note, very, very, very powerful. And, coming from staff that say, here's how your gift helped me do my work. Or, you know, you're trying to make it not just helped me.
Absolutely.
Here's how you're doing the work for the organization, I guess, maybe through me. Yeah. Whether I'm cleaning the floors, or
Absolutely.
or I'm the CFO.
And that's my ministry with the staff, to let every single one feel that they're feeding the poor also. It's not just the fundraisers, and it's not just the ones who handle the big donors.
We still have a couple minutes left. I'm teasing these ideas out of you. What haven't we talked about yet? Your session is coming up. You must have more in your head.
I think we have to put an emphasis, if we want to really have donors move up the ladder, on monthly donations. Like, that's one of the ways we incentivize our phone callers and our direct mail and everybody. We see how many monthly they can get, you know, how many people they can convert from single gift givers to monthly. And it's, when I say single gift givers, I don't mean they give one single gift for the year, but they give in single times, like maybe 3 times a year, 4 times a year. Mm-hmm. And we've been having a great success with it. The monthly donors has a tremendous advantage. According to industry averages, they last more than twice the length of a donor that does not. They renew very easily, and they actually upgrade very easily, because when you have a person giving $10 a month, that's 120 a year. They don't think of it as 120. They think of it as $10.
Yeah.
So when you call them and say, we're having a famine right now in Guatemala, they had floods, and we have problems. The coffee workers are laid off. Would you mind going up to $12? psychologically, again, they're thinking of $2. They're not thinking of 24. So they're very, we have had great success upgrading monthly. So our website is designed to get monthly gifts. Our default in many of the pages is for monthly. And it created a little yang to the yin. I mean, I have to admit, a lot of people felt that was just deceiving because they didn't read it properly and things like that. So we have in bold letters, this is a gift that will be taken out every month and so forth. But you know what? Our monthly gifts on the web increased by 3% monthly with that default, because the majority, really want to do it, and it's an idea they didn't tend to have and they wouldn't normally choose, but once they saw it there, it's amazing when people are given the power to change. They have the single gift option underneath. They really usually don't, when the same with the mail. When we tell them, if you don't like the way you're being treated by mail, they feel so good about having the power that they leave it, they don't.
Angel, and subsumed in all this is that it's so much cheaper to treat a donor properly and upgrade them than it is to acquire a new one. And
Absolutely.
We don't have time to go in, but that's axiomatic. So much better than acquiring new donors.
That's correct.
Angel Aloma, he is Executive Director of Food for the Poor, based where in Florida? Coconut?
In Coconut Creek, the butterfly capital of the world.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure, Tony. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Angel Aloma. And thank you. This is Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio coverage of Fundraising Day 2014.